to the Spiritual Regression Show with Rena on moretalk.tv. My name is Rena, and I am the Director of Divine Aspect, a therapy practice based in Dorset, UK, focusing on life coaching, regression therapy, life between life therapy, and hypnotherapy. I am here today with Lorraine Flaherty, an international trainer and therapist who has created the process called Inner Freedom Therapy, which includes hypnotherapy, regression therapy, future life progression, and spirit attachment clearing. She uses this process to help people reach their full potential. She also teaches clinical hypnosis to medical students, doctors, dentists, midwives in universities in the UK, including Oxford and Cambridge, and is the author of Healing with Past Life Therapy, Transformational Journeys Through Time and Space. Lorraine, it is a delight having you on the show.
Thank you very much. Good to be here.
Good to have you. So I was just wondering if you could tell us a little bit about yourself and how you got into the whole area of regression therapy.
Well, I've been a real seeker of knowledge and questioning who we are and why we're here for most of my life. I was born into an Irish Catholic family, and as most people will know, the Catholic religion is quite dogmatic. And I knew right from a very early age that some of the things that they were teaching me weren't right. So it led me on a search down the rabbit hole of religion, spirituality. And what I learned along the way, particularly from the more esoteric sides of religions, was that there was information that was encoded within us. There was information about who we really are, and more about us on a soul level, deeply embedded. And most of those ancient groups talked about initiation or meditation as a means to get access to the information. So I was always looking for something. I was always looking for a key that would help me to find it. And over the years, what I discovered was that hypnosis and certainly the regression that occurs using the tool of hypnosis was the key. So it was officially about 15 years ago that I actually started training, and I've been working with it ever since.
And you've now recently published a book called Healing with Past Life Therapy, Transformational Journeys Through Time and Space. What I really loved about your book is the analogy of the Wizard of Oz. Can you tell us why you use this analogy, and also what is the significance to your readers?
Absolutely. I chose it because over the years, not only was it my favourite book, but when I looked into it in greater depth, I discovered that Frank L. Baum had been a theosophist. And he'd also been somebody who was a real believer in past lives. He firmly believed that he and his wife had been together through many lifetimes. And the analogy that goes through it is such a perfect metaphor for the soul's journey, because it's about Dorothy, who goes on a quest because she's dissatisfied with life and where she finds herself. And she ends up in a magical world where she's challenged, and she learns along the way that she needs to find the inner wisdom that's inside of her, which is represented by the scarecrow who's looking for a brain. She needs to find a place of compassion and love, both for self and for others, beautifully illustrated by the Tin Man. But she also needs to have the courage to step out onto her journey, again illustrated by our cowardly lion. And she meets with these characters along the way, and they go on a search. They are told by the Good Witch, who kind of represents the unconscious, if you like, who's constantly pushing us and leading us in the right direction, that there is a space, there is a person, a wizard, that can provide them with the answers. So they go on this journey. And of course, along the way, they are challenged. They are interrupted. They are forced to face their fears by the Wicked Witch, who turns up at regular intervals. And again, it's the message that throughout life, it is the adversity, it's the challenge that makes us grow. And it's only by facing up to their fears, facing up to the Wicked Witch, that they discover that they have all of the qualities that they needed inside of them all the time. And it ends so beautifully with Dorothy discovering that the red sparkly shoes that she was wearing were the tools that could get her to exactly where she needed to be. And they'd always been there inside, but she'd been looking outside of herself for answers. And I think this is so true about life, that many people think that if they find a new home or a new job or a new career or a new relationship, that it will change how they feel, not recognizing that actually they have to change what's going on with them on the inside, and then somehow life seems to just bring those things that we desire to us. So the journey home, the journey along the yellow brick road, is that path through life. So it just worked for me so perfectly.
I just think it's so beautiful how you manage to pull together all that from the Wizard of Oz. And I think for many people, reaching our full potential as souls in this life is so crucial, yet it is such an elusive dream.
Yeah.
But it is really it's a lot easier than what people think it is. Could you just talk us through this a little bit more from the perspective of the soul about reaching our full potential?
Yes. I think that for so many people, there are fears, doubts, limitations, limiting ideas that we collect as we come down into the earth plane, because we are very much affected by the environment and the people that are around us as we grow up. We know that as young children, we are like sponges. We're absorbing everything that goes on around us. And all of us will have come into life with a mission, with an idea, a quest, something that we had chosen before we arrived on the earth plane. So there is a sense within each and every one of us that we have a purpose, that we have a reason for being here. But of course, we get amnesia in that process of being born. So for the majority of people, they forget completely. And they start to believe these limiting ideas. They start to believe perhaps that the world isn't a safe place, or that there are dangers around every corner, if that's what they're led to believe in childhood. And this puts blocks up. This stops them from moving forward. It stops them from chasing their dreams. And many people live lives that are sort of handed down from generation to generation. They tend to follow in the footsteps of the people that have gone before them. And this makes them stay small in many ways because it's safer. And I do believe that the important thing for all of us to do is to get access to that truth, to the aspect, the divine aspect that's inside each and every one of us, so that we can step onto that path. And it requires, well, it requires quite hard work. It requires a really deep look in itself, and it's not always easy to face those fears and those shadows. But when we have the courage to do so, and we love ourselves enough, then we get to do what I believe is the key thing about this work, which is a process of clutter clearing. It's almost as though we're able to go in and sift through and to find out where those limiting beliefs and ideas really came from. And when we understand that, then we're able to let them go. And in letting them go, we clear the space, we clear the way so that we can step into our highest potential.
And that's brilliant. So let's break this down a little bit for our viewers, because when you initially started, you said we all come down here with a purpose. So it sounds like most things are planned. How does this then affect free will?
Well, I believe that there is a plan, there is a mission, there is a life path chosen. I also believe that we have volunteers in the spirit realms that agree to join us on that journey to help us to either remind us or to challenge us, to help us along the way. We also have signposts that we may have set up, so situations or events, often even just things like a book or something that may appear or come into our space. So there are many things that can prompt us along the way on that journey, but the idea of free will means that we don't actually have to accept the mission when we're here. We do have a choice. So it could be that we are presented with a challenge or an opportunity, and we may just simply decide as a result of our free will not to go there. We may decide not to take that challenge. And what that usually does is provide us with similar challenges later on in life. We may get another opportunity to learn that lesson, but we still have free will. So we could still say no to it. And if we continue to say no throughout a lifetime so that the mission or the quest is undone, that gets carried over and it is retained in the energy field of the soul. And it means that we just have to do it again in the next life. So actually, it's much better that we just face it while we're here and work our way through it.
Which is fair enough. And tell me something. I mean, with things like life purposes, how do we account for human atrocities? You know, things like wars, child abuse, the Holocaust, genocide. How do those elements fit into a purpose, like a life purpose? Why would someone choose to do that or enable those things to happen?
It's a big question, and I know that a lot of people struggle with this one, but I firmly believe that as a soul on our journey, we have to experience everything. And that means that we have to experience good and bad, rich and poor, health and sickness. It also means that throughout our lifetimes, there are going to be moments when we are a victim, and there are going to be moments when we choose to play the role as the perpetrator, the actual, the abuser, the torturer. And I do believe that for our soul to complete its missions and its entire journey, it has to experience all of those things. So these two will have been agreed to in advance. A soul will have chosen to experience suffering. And oftentimes we find, and certainly I find in my work when I'm working through the past lives with people, that they get a huge shock, because it often turns out that the people that challenge them the most or hurt them the most, the ones that actually commit these atrocities, are part of their actual soul group. They may well be the people in the spirit realms that love them the most. And often they choose that role because if someone's going to experience suffering, if that's what they've chosen to experience in a lifetime, a soul partner will want to make sure that they do it thoroughly, so that they do it completely, so they tick that box very, very firmly, so they don't leave anything undone, so that they don't have to experience that again in another lifetime. So it's often not what people think. And I've often had clients who are concerned, worried that they may have been a bad person, that they may have committed atrocities in a bad life, and perhaps that's why they're being punished now. They worry it's a karmic thing. And when I've taken them into lifetimes where they may have committed what appear to be atrocities, so for example, I had a client who was working, she was part of the army under the control of Genghis Khan, and was going out and murdering and pillaging and committing huge atrocities in these villages. But when we went into the mindset of the soldier that she'd been in that lifetime, he firmly believed that what he was doing was right, because he was following the orders of his leader, and he was utterly loyal, completely prepared to lose his own life in the cause that he believed in. So when he went in and committed those murders, he believed that those people were the enemy. So his mindset was that what he was doing was correct. So again, it's very hard when we go into judgment about whether something is right or wrong or good or bad, because often the intention of the person in that moment in time is right. It's certainly right for them in that moment.
Could you just tell us, in terms of suffering, how does that affect the evolution of the soul? Why would someone want to experience suffering?
Well, there are many layers to this. As I said, it could be that they just want the experience to tick a box, but often the challenge that will have been set in the spirit realms may be to do with forgiveness. I know that I've had quite a few clients recently who agreed to be tested to see whether they could still come to a place of unconditional love for another soul, no matter what they did to them. That was the test. So the volunteers really let them have it. The volunteers really tested them to the edges of their limits by torturing them, by abusing them, by committing all kinds of dreadful things. And their job was to forgive them. Now, some of them were able to do it in the lifetime. Some of them were able to get to that place even while the terrible things were happening. But often they weren't able to do that. But when we do the past life work, people get to reconnect. They get to meet with those souls that may have committed these atrocities in the past lives, and start to understand what the agreement was. They start to understand the challenge. And as a result of that understanding, and also understanding that at a certain level they volunteered too, they chose to have that experience, that it was pre-set up. When they realise that, they are able to forgive. They're able to let go of the anger, they're able to let go of the blame, and they're able to get back to a place of personal responsibility. They start to understand that this was for their own soul's development. So they're able to release all the negative feeling, which of course not only frees them, but it also frees the other soul that was involved, or other souls that may have been involved. And that starts to generate healing at a huge level, because as people do start to let go of this blame, as they do start to recognize that all the things that they experience in their lifetime on some level were chosen by them, they start to realize that the people in their current lives also may well be part of a grand scheme. And people stop blaming others. They stop giving away their power to others. And instead of asking questions like, why are you doing this to me? Why have you hurt me? The question becomes, why did I choose this? What was it that I had chosen to learn in this experience? And we start to see those people that come into our lives, even the ones that challenge us the most, as providing us with gifts. And that means we move into a state of not just understanding and forgiveness, but gratitude to all the people who feature in our lives. And when we start to resonate with that energy, when we start to vibrate from an energy of gratitude, it does start to lift the energy of the planet, because we raise our vibration, and it's like a ripple in a pond effect. Each shift that we create within ourselves and those other souls that were with us on the journey, it starts to elevate the whole.
And also, I think it gives us a more empowered view, doesn't it? Because we ask, why are we choosing to do this, as opposed to why the other person is doing this to us. So that's a very, very interesting perspective to take with regards to suffering.
Yes.
So what we're going to do is we're going to come back after the break, still talking to the delightful Lorraine. So we'll see you shortly after this break.
Healing the Eternal Soul is a book sprinkled with case examples that makes it an invaluable resource for those who assist others in achieving contact with their eternal part. It lends hope to those whose lives are stuck or riddled with painful residuals from past lives. More so, it's an incredibly interesting read.
The Past Life Regression Academy teaches hypnosis, past life regression, regression therapy, and life between lives regression internationally. Hundreds of students have been through the Academy training program and have successful practices. This is because of the amazing results they get and the referrals that come from it. For more information, see the Regression Academy website.
Welcome back, and we're joined by our delightful Lorraine today. So Lorraine, just coming back to what we were talking about with suffering and atrocities and the soul's growth and soul evolution, I just wanted you to talk to us about karma. The traditional beliefs of karma is that if you did something bad in your past life, or if you inflicted any form of suffering in your past life, it's going to come back tenfold to you in this life. But from what you have said just before the break, it is about doing a favor to another soul to help them grow and help them evolve. So how does karma then affect someone from reaching their full potential?
Yes, I think the traditional view has often been that karma is about punishment and reward, which is not how I see it. I see it really as being a balance, seeing it as being a means by which we connect all of the challenges and all of the things that we've agreed to in various different lifetimes. And as I said, I think that as a soul, we have to experience everything that life has to offer. But as we come into each lifetime, I do believe that the interactions that we have with people set up kind of almost karmic links. So it's not that we're being punished, but I do think that the idea that we reap what we sow does have an effect, so that our actions will actually have consequences, and those consequences will lead to us having to balance what we have done. So it's not necessarily that if we do something bad, then we're going to be punished for it and then we're going to suffer. But in our soul's evolution, we really do have to have balance. So it's a kind of equalization, if you like, rather than us kind of, as I say, being punished for something that we've done wrong.
Got it. Oh, that's really interesting to hear. And now going back to your statement earlier on about how we come down, we have a purpose, we come down, there's amnesia, and then we've got limiting beliefs to make us stay small. Why are most people perceived to not be successful then in meeting their life purpose or reaching their full potential?
I think for a lot of people, when we come down onto the earth plane, remembering that we are a soul, a spiritual being housed in a human body, the human body is much denser, it's much heavier, and there is so much confusion when we arrive on the earth plane, and there is so much historically coming down through our ancestors, and that's encoded into our DNA, that makes not only the amnesia, but finding the truth, finding the answers to who we really are and why we're here, quite tricky, quite difficult. You know, we're thrown into families who have their own ideas, their own agendas, and their own beliefs about life and about how it works. Then we're put into the education system, which has a whole other agenda. And we then deal with our peers, and we have to deal with society. So there are so many layers. There's so many stories that we get told. And as a child, we don't have, in those early years, an ability to discern or decide what's true and what's false. So we just tend to take on board what we see around us as truth. So for some people who are very lucky, if you grow up in an environment where people believe that life is an adventure, and they believe that it's okay to take risks, and they believe that they're going to be okay and they're going to be safe, those people are going to be much more willing to put themselves out there, to take chances, and to trust that they will be held as they go through life. But in the majority of cases, it's not always the way. You know, the education system often tends to focus on what's wrong or what doesn't work, and I think that we carry that with us through life. The idea for most people that we have to live safely, we have to get a job, and we have to get a mortgage, and you know, and we follow a set plan. When we see so many following the same path, it's quite hard to step out and do something different. And I think that many people nowadays who maybe had fallen into that track, that following the path they think they should follow, are now starting to question. They're now starting to see that there is more to us, there is more to life. And it's not always easy to step out onto the spiritual path and put your hands up and say, I think that there is more, I think that this is different. Traditionally, people that have stepped out of the norm have been persecuted throughout history, or if not persecuted, certainly laughed at in many ways. And it's only in the last few years, I think, that a more spiritual outlook has been accepted, and we're now starting to see spirituality and a greater sense of people tapping into that truth of who we are, even starting to move into the business world. And I know that many people that I work with, because sometimes I work in the corporate field too, are asking those wider questions, that why are we here, and how can we make a difference? How can we work together to make a difference to the world?
And I just wanted to ask you, for anyone out there, anyone who's listening and who's watching, could you give us some examples of some pre-programmed limiting beliefs that runs through heads, so that they can be aware of any, if they have them?
Indeed, I think one of the classic ones is the idea that I'm not good enough. I'm not good enough, or I'm not ready. And again, we go back to childhood, and I do a lot of work with presentation skills. And so many times when people are put into regression, they may go back to an event or an experience that happened when they were 5 years old, or just at 5, 6 years old, just in those stages where they were just starting to learn to read, they were just starting to develop, and they may have been asked to do something in school in front of their peers, and they tried and it didn't go so well because they didn't have the experience, they didn't have the ability or the confidence at that time, and maybe they got told off, or maybe they were laughed at. And that creates an imprint. That feeling, the negative feeling that they may have experienced, becomes embedded into the memory banks. It becomes a part of who they are. And then in future times, when they're not even aware of it, they may find themselves in a situation where they're being asked to do something in front of a group, and immediately they have this feeling of fear that's generated somewhere deep down inside their body. It's actually registered, it's actually logged in, and they don't know where it comes from, and it amplifies the nerves or slight trepidation that they might have in that situation. But it feels like it's linked to that event, even though it goes way, way back. And of course, what that does is it reinforces, it creates a little cybernetic loop where the mind says, oh, body feels bad. This doesn't feel good. So therefore, what do I have to worry about? And then the body will go on a search for a story that will say, well, obviously, if you're feeling bad about this, then maybe you're not good enough. Maybe this isn't for you. And they talk themselves out of doing the experience. And again, this creates almost a self-fulfilling prophecy, because then they don't perform well. And this creates more evidence that goes into the pot that says I'm not good enough. And then what happens is that part of them then starts to look for more evidence. So they might be out with friends, or they might be doing something at work. They might not even be related. But if they make a slight mistake, it's almost as though that part of them pops up and says, see, told you weren't good enough. And this goes on and on and on, more and more self-perpetuating, till eventually some people just end up with huge anxieties, huge fears, and they talk themselves out of actually trying anything new, because they already know what's going to happen and how they're going to feel, because it's happened so many times before.
Yeah, it's all about pre-programmed limiting beliefs, isn't it?
It is.
Besides having them installed, for lack of a better word, within themselves, through childhood experiences, can perhaps the ancestral line actually also affect limiting beliefs as well as past lives?
Absolutely, and I'm seeing this more and more now, that the threads to these issues that we have go so deep, and the ancestral stuff is actually, it's kind of downloaded through our DNA. And even in my own experience, I have an Irish background, and in doing my own research, I know that there was a lot through my Irish ancestry. There were a lot of fears around poverty, around starvation, around hunger, because there were the famine times in Ireland, and so there were many limitations and fears about being successful, about being able to sort of really make something of your life, because the ancestors had believed in many cases that either they weren't good enough, or there wasn't going to be enough. And again, unless we go back and heal that, unless we actually go back and transform those beliefs right at the core, right at the root, and whether that is a past life level, or whether it is going right the way back to the early ancestors, then it's not going to change for us in the current life. if we go back far enough with our ancestors, we will know that oftentimes were really hard. It's not like nowadays where we just go down the road to a shop to get what we need. Back in the earliest times, there was a real need for survival, and many times the early ancestors were so caught up with trying to find food and trying to protect from external dangers that they actually forgot to connect with one another on a loving and kind of compassionate level. So that element got missed. And that has been carried down through many family lines where either the children weren't nurtured enough or weren't given the attention that they needed. It wasn't seen as being the most important thing that needed to happen. And so often there has been a space where people haven't taken care of, they haven't nurtured each other, they haven't loved each other enough. And that gets handed down again and again and again through families. And of course, it's perceived as normal, because if it's what you saw growing up, then it's what you're going to do as an adult. Even though we might say, well, I'm never going to be like my parents. I didn't like what they did to me when I was a child, so I'm not going to do that. Time and time again, we see people stepping into those same roles. They do end up doing the same things that their parents did without even realizing it, because it's so deeply embedded into who they are.
Oh, that's really interesting. And like you said, we could actually have chosen our parents or our ancestors as well to bring down this particular lesson to learn. So can we then talk about a bit more about soul groups and soulmates, perhaps? Because I think a lot of people believe that if you have found a soulmate, you've probably found a romantic love. But it is a bit deeper than that, isn't it?
It certainly is, and I write a whole chapter about this in my book. In fact, there's a chapter about soul groups and one distinctly about soulmates, because I think that often people do get confused, because our soul group is really our soul family. So it's almost like a community. It's a group of souls that will be working together on a similar theme. And we're all working on maybe different variations of that theme, but we support each other and we're there for each other, and we will come in through various different lifetimes. And even within a soul group, there may be a smaller core soul group. So there may be perhaps 7 or 8 different souls that may tend to incarnate with you in many different lifetimes, playing the significant characters. So they might come in as parents or siblings or children or even life partners sometimes. And distinct from that, we talk about soulmates. And many people think that a soulmate is your romantic partner, the love of your life. I know a lot of people talk about finding the one, and don't rest until they've found the one, because there is a belief that it's almost something miraculous that happens when you find that one soulmate, that suddenly everything falls into place and that life is going to be easy. And that's just not the case, because our soulmates fit into that category of our closest soul group members, and they are often the ones that agreed to challenge us the most. So our soulmates are people who have volunteered, or spirits, souls that have volunteered to come down and help us with a challenge. Now, it might be a loving challenge, but it also might only be a short loving challenge. It might be a temporary thing that they've come in. Or it may be they come in with a challenge, and once we've learnt it, once we've overcome that challenge, they then move on and we continue on our journey. And maybe somebody else comes in with a different challenge or a different version of it. And as a result, it means that we may have many, many, many soulmates. Even sometimes people that come in for very short times and then disappear may have been a soulmate.
That's interesting as well. So let's go back to the whole romantic notion of this one perfect soul or one perfect person for you. I think a lot of people term this as twin flames. What are your beliefs around twin flames? Do you believe that they do exist?
I think that they do, but again, I think that the perception is not always completely accurate, because again, people think that the twin flame or twin soul, as it's sometimes called, is somebody that is going to be our kind of mirror, and therefore when we find them, it's as though the piece of the jigsaw puzzle all comes together, and then we're saved, then life is going to be great. In my experience, twin flames or twin souls aren't always even a romantic partner. It may be that what's happening is that it's an element of our soul energy that is that makes up who we are. Instead of just choosing to come down into one body in an incarnation, it's as though the soul energy splits, and we form into two distinct different personalities, two distinct different human lifetimes. And this can happen at the same time on the earth plane. And when that energy has split, sometimes people do feel a bit of a calling. They do feel a bit of a desire or a need to find that other part, that piece of themselves. But they don't necessarily come in the same sex or opposite sexes. So it's not always going to be a loving partner. And what may also happen is that even when you find that sort of twin soul, that energy of that is the same, is that it could clash hugely when you meet them, because there are so many similarities. And of course, the challenge may also be that the soul may have chosen to come in and experience life from a very different perspective. So there may be absolute opposite beliefs, there may be absolute opposite personalities. So it doesn't necessarily fit that it's going to be an easy connection when those two parts of the soul energy come together.
This is so fascinating. But what we can do is we can pick this up after the break. So stay tuned for more with Lorraine Flaherty.
Have you ever wondered what happens after death? Deep hypnosis opens up the most amazing soul memories of a spirit world that awaits us all. Follow the fascinating journey of 15 ordinary people in the book Exploring the Eternal Soul, who have been regressed beyond a past life into the afterlife.
The Past Life Regression Academy teaches hypnosis, past life regression, regression therapy, and life between lives regression internationally. Hundreds of students have been through the Academy training program and have successful practices. This is because of the amazing results they get and the referrals that come from it. For more information, see the Regression Academy website.
Welcome back. We are joined by Lorraine Flaherty, and we are talking about the soul and the soul's journey. So Lorraine, I just wanted to ask you about Akashic Records, since you have written some things about them in your book. And what is the significance of Akashic Records to souls?
Yes, the Akashic Records were mentioned by Edgar Cayce, who was a psychic many years ago, who was able to get access to information about people's past lives. And it's been described as a kind of library in which all the information about every soul or every incarnation that has ever happened has been stored. And in trance, he was able to go in there and open up the files, open up these records, and get data and information for people. Jung also referred to it. Jung talked about it as a collective unconscious rather than a personal unconscious. And what I believe is that when we go into the state of hypnosis, we are able to gain access to our own records. We're able to get access to the information stored there in the Akashic Records. And that's how, if we ask the right question, it is how we can learn about who we used to be and the lifetimes that we may have lived.
Right. So does that mean we now as living beings can access these records? And if so, how do we do so?
Yes, we can. And the easiest way for us to do that is to go into a focused state of attention, whether it's meditation, whether it's hypnosis. Although I have to say that there have been many cases where people do spontaneously recall their past lives. Sometimes people will report that they get information in dreams. They will have a recurring dream that keeps happening. And that's because when we're in the sleep state, we're also, we're able to gain access. It's as though the veil, when we go into that focused state of attention or the sleep-like state, has dropped. And it's that veil that prevents us from seeing and getting access to the memories. We also know that many children will spontaneously recall and remember, usually up to about the age of 6 or 7 years old. They will often talk about their previous incarnations, their previous lives. So it's actually quite simple, really. It's a really simple process. And intention is the key. So if we go into that focused state with a question in mind about a challenge or an issue that we may be experiencing, then when we're guided in the right way, we can go in there and find the right the right doorway or the right portal that will allow us to get access to that information.
So how do the Akashic records link to our life purpose? How does that knowledge help us?
Well, usually there is a theme in those past lives. So often when clients that I'm working with have that question about what their life purpose may be, I will get them to go back and find the most significant lifetime in which that life purpose may have already been set, or perhaps finding a lifetime whereby they were challenged or tested and they weren't able to complete their life purpose, to see if there's a block, to see if there's something from holding them back. Because if they're experiencing frustration in their current life, if there's something holding them back or they feel like they are lost or stuck, there may well have been something that happened in another lifetime. Very often I work with people on the spiritual path who are healers, and I even know my own experience. I felt stuck probably 10 or 12 years ago when I was starting to first embark on this work. So I asked a colleague to help me to see if there had been something in a past life that was in the way of me finding my life purpose. And I went back to a lifetime where I'd been burnt at the stake, and I was burnt, accused of being a witch. Although I hadn't been a witch, of course, I'd been a healer, I'd worked with herbs, I had been the midwife in the local village, and I had done some healing for a woman who was about to have a child, and she was in great distress. And I sent the equivalent of hands-on healing, so probably very similar to what we would know as Reiki today. And the child survived, which was, on the one hand, good, on the other hand, not so good, because it turned out to have been Siamese twins. So when the child was born, it was actually 2, and they were joined together at the spine. So of course the baby comes out with 2 arms and 2 legs and 2 heads, which this was medieval times. It causes a furore in the present time if a child is born like that. But back then they were terrified and they assumed that I'd been in league with the devil. So they took me off and they burnt me at the stake. And at the time when I was leaving my body, I made a vow in that lifetime that I wouldn't use my healing powers again because it was too painful and I was going to get punished for it. And that had stayed with me, that energy. It was almost like a vow. It was like a contract that had been written. And the energy of it was still there in my energy field. And it was only when I identified it by going into that past life and seeing that I didn't have to be afraid of that anymore, seeing that I wasn't going to be punished in this life. But also, I had to be discerning. In that life, I hadn't really checked in to see if it was okay for me to do the healing. So I also got that message from the souls that I'd been within that lifetime. And of course, I was able to forgive the people that had burnt me, seeing that it wasn't their fault. Of course, in that lifetime, their fear about what I had done was the reason why they persecuted me, not because they were my enemy in any way. So it was very, very healing. And this is coming up time and time again with people that I work with, that they may have been persecuted, they may have suffered in some way as a result of doing what they were genuinely there to do, and they may have put a block on it. They may have said, right, I'm not going to do that. So once we clear that out of the way, there's nothing stopping them. And as soon as I cleared that veil, I mean, literally the door started opening, and my work just moved so rapidly from that point onwards.
I just have an interesting question. I mean, when we come down, like you mentioned earlier, we come down with a quest or an idea or a purpose, and then we come down with amnesia so that we can evolve and learn our life lessons. I'm just wondering if we are going and accessing our Akashic records, whether we are breaking some form of cosmic law.
This is a question that comes up quite a lot. And what I know to be true is that we're never able to get access anything if it's inappropriate for us to do so. And I believe that right now, in this day and age, with the awakenings that we're seeing, with the shifts that we're seeing, with the acceleration of the spiritual journey for most people, I think that we now at this time have permission to clear this out of the way. I actually do think, and this has been reinforced from messages that I've got doing the past life work from many people, that the time is now right for people to start clutter clearing, to let go of those blocks, and that many of those blocks were put in place many lifetimes ago in preparation for this time that we're in now. And so finding a means by which people can move forward more quickly, finding a means by which they can let go of some of the denser energies, the blame, the guilt, the fears, the limitations. By letting that go, what's happening is that people's soul vibration, their energy is starting to lift, it's getting lighter. And that's starting to create a huge amount of healing for the planet, because it's really needed, it's really necessary at this moment in time.
Which is fair enough. The other question I have as well is, in each individual life, do we only come down with one life purpose, or have we got several life purposes?
I think that depends on the individual. I think it's possible for us to have more than one. Probably depends on how brave we were, or how crazy when we were there in the spirit realms, with regards to how much we were going to take on board. But remember that there will still be the remnants. There will be unfinished business, unresolved issues that may come in from another lifetime. So it may be that there is one specific mission or quest per lifetime, but then we have the opportunity to deal with some of those other unresolved issues as well.
Okay. And now we've been talking quite a lot about past life regression. I was wondering if we could talk about future life progression. Can we use future life progression to make absolute predictions of our future lives or our futures in this life?
Categorically not. I'm delighted to say no. The future life work is quite different. So what we're tapping into is potential futures, probable futures, which I guess fits very much in with the psychic realms, because we all have a trajectory, and we will all have, if we were able to stop and think about it, a clear idea of what's going to happen later on in our lives if we stay on the same path. You know, if we really thought about it, then that would it would unfold. It would make sense to us. The trouble is that most people don't tend to look that far ahead. They tend to be dealing with kind of immediate things or short-term plans. They don't actually think about, well, what's going to happen if I keep eating like this, or if I keep drinking like this, or if I keep smoking like this, or if I still, retain this job that I don't like, or I stay in this relationship and I just wait for the right time before I leave. So what the future life work does is puts people into that same focused state of attention, and then it gets them to travel into their most probable future if they stay on the same path that they're on now, so that they can see what they need to keep, or perhaps what they need to let go of. But then what's wonderful is that if they do have ideas in mind about perhaps something else that they might like to do, or other plans, other goals that they may have thought about, they can actually try on alternative versions. So it's almost as though they can go into parallel versions, if you like, of a lifetime. So what might happen if you do write that book? What might happen if you do go and live in that other country? What might happen if you do have a complete change of career? But my favourite part of the work is to get people to reconnect with their higher self, the almost the divine aspect of self. And this is a part of them that is above and beyond the space where those limiting fears and ideas will have been absorbed. So it's the part of them that knows exactly what they're capable of. It knows exactly why they're here, and it also knows exactly who they really are. And when people come back into alignment, they come into the space of acknowledgement and recognition of that truth. I then get them to float forward into the highest potential future if they were to step into that place. And it can be really, really uplifting for people. It can be really extraordinary because it could lead them into a space that they hadn't even dreamed of. Or sometimes they get a real boost because they realise that actually they are on the right path, that everything that they're doing is unfolding perfectly, and that they just need to stay on that path. They may need to fine tune a little bit, but they can honour who they are and the choices that they've made. And even once they've seen that highest potential future, it still doesn't mean they have to act on it. I've had many clients who have gone out to the edges of what's possible, and they've said, well, that's all great and wonderful, but I don't actually feel as though I need to, in this life, work that hard or get that far. Actually, I would be comfortable even just getting halfway to that. And it provides them real clarity. And of course, when they come back, then they find it so much easier to make decisions about their life and about the direction that they're going to head, because the question then becomes, is this going to lead me closer to or further away than the truth of who I really am? And so it becomes a kind of inner guidance, an inner compass that they can use as they move forward in their life.
And I guess that kind of answered my other question, because in your book, you've succinctly said that a large number of people live their lives in quiet frustration and dreams of another life underneath the surface. And this is how future life progression can then help them discover and find their true potential and their highest potential of living, can't it?
Indeed. And I go back to our earlier part of the conversation, and that often as we're growing up, we become influenced by the people around us. And I teach clinical hypnosis in medical schools. And a lot of these young doctors that I work with, when I hear their stories, I realise that being a doctor is not their dream. It was actually their parents' dream, or it was something that they wanted for them. And I see many of these students who are, you know, their extracurricular work is art or drama, and you see them light up when they do these other projects, and then, you know, their energy shifts very much when they come back into doing this work. And it's tragic, really, that many people do become so influenced and live their lives desiring or just trying to please other people. And often it's too late by the time they realise that their own dreams have been unfulfilled. So finding that, I think, is really, really important for us to be satisfied and for us to have real fulfillment in our lives.
So in one sentence, for 1 minute, what is your advice to the viewers of finding their happiness or finding their true potential the way Dorothy does?
I would say explore, explore, explore. Get out onto that yellow brick road. Go and ask questions, meditate, experience past lives. Find somebody that can be a guide for you on the journey, to take you into the subconscious so that you can ask the right questions and find that spark, find that little divine element within you, and get back in touch with the truth of who you really are and why you're here.
Well, thank you, Lorraine. It was such a delight having you here. If anyone would like to get in touch with you, how can they do so?
My website is innerjourneys.co.uk, and they can email me if they have questions, Lorraine@innerjourneys.co.uk.
And how can they get your book should they wish to read it?
The book is available either on Amazon or at Findhorn Press, and I also have a couple of CDs called Inner Freedom 1 and 2 that support the work of the book, that will guide people on those journeys so that they can get more information and find out some of those answers about themselves.
Explore, explore, explore.
Indeed.
Thank you so much, Lorraine, for joining us. It's been so delightful having you.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you, Lorraine, for being part of the show. That's all the time we have for this show. Thank you to everyone for tuning in. For more information on Lorraine Flaherty, please visit innerjourneys.co.uk. For more information about me, please visit divineaspect.com. I look forward to you joining me for the next show.
Healing the Eternal Soul is a book sprinkled with case examples that makes it an invaluable resource for those who assist others in achieving contact with their eternal part. It lends hope to those whose lives are stuck or riddled with painful residuals from past lives. More so, it's an incredibly interesting read.